right, we are so thrilled to be joined by Larra Overton, Colts host, producer, and reporter. You had like 6 other jobs too that you mentioned, but we'll just keep it at that. Larra, thanks for joining us.
Thank you guys so much for taking the time, making the trip up to Westfield to join us at Grand Park. It's certainly been an active training camp so far, and you got the first full padded day of practice out here, so it's been great.
It's all happening right now. So what's the biggest story right now? It has to be Anthony Richardson, of course.
Anthony Richardson has certainly impressed. Everything that you expected and more. And he sat out practice yesterday, had a minor procedure on his septum, but right back into it today alongside Gardner Minshew and Sam Ehlinger. And I think a few of the things that stand out right now about what Anthony Richardson has been able to do is all of the physical expectations, the skill set that he was so touted for within the draft process, all of those were there. But then even beyond that, it's the quick chemistry that he's been able to establish with a number of his different targets, a number of his receivers and pass catchers in general. I mean, did you see the 60-yard bomb to Alec Pierce just last
we saw
week?
It, yes.
I mean, that's just like a glimpse of the things that he has done. And I think what's really encouraging is those type of plays have been consistent day in and day out. And that's something that head coach Shane Steichen has reinforced, is stacking those good days.
Have you been able to get an idea of, what this offense is going to look like with Anthony Richardson at quarterback? Because obviously the first thing you notice when you show up and you see Richardson and then Gardner Minshew and Sam Ehlinger, and those two quarterbacks specifically probably help this, but it's just he looks different. He's bigger, he's stronger, the ball comes out better, he's faster, but we want to know, generally, all of us, like, what is this offense going to have to look like for Richardson to be a functional quarterback in year one, and not just get by?
Well, you definitely have to have great communication with the offensive line, right? And he has a veteran offensive line that is heavily invested, that the Colts have heavily invested in, and you're going to get better production out of that group than you had last year, surrounded, of course, at the center of it with Ryan Kelly, Quentin Nelson, Braden Smith, all of those guys, plus the young guys who have been in with that as well. But one of the differences that you see when you do have Anthony Richardson and Gardner Minshew, and throw Sam Ehlinger into the mix, is there's an element of mobility at quarterback that the Colts have not had and have not been able to build an offense around. And when you brought Shane Steichen in, you knew that was going to be one of the assets he brought within the offense because of course, the resume that he has working with the quarterbacks who he has. Most recently, of course, Jalen Hurts, Justin Herbert prior to that. So when you do have that factor of mobility, that's something that this Colts defense has talked about, how difficult it is. I think, you guys are going to talk to Kwity Paye, I believe, at some point today. And Kwity joked that it's a bit demoralizing when you have to go up against a quarterback like Anthony Richardson because of the different things that he can do, the mobility that he has, the ability he has to extend plays in that factor. And that's really, I think, the big thing that you have seen so far in this early portion of camp. Still a relatively small sample size. I think this might be practice number 5. They all start to run together when you get into the second week of camp. But I do think that those are the big key contributors that you note just in this first week of work.
All right, the biggest criticism for Richardson coming out, of course, was accuracy overall. I don't think, people who really watched this tape weren't criticizing pocket movement or just feel for the position. It was really just he's missing way too many throws. So early on, look, Sam, you saw 3 throws, and you were like, maybe he's accurate. Maybe he's fixed it all. We saw 3 throws on air over here. We're convinced maybe all the accuracy issues are fixed. Any sign of that early on?
I think what we saw, and fortunate to have the position of watching him come in and do rookie minicamp, OTAs, and then the vet minicamp period, is you saw him, he missed throws in there, which you expected him to, right? Anyone who's 21 years old, who's walking into the NFL as a quarterback is going to have those. But it was great to see when he would have one of those errant throws is Shane Steichen would immediately get right up to him, and he was very quick to take the coaching and very responsive to that. And you could tell wants to be coached hard. And I mean that in a sense that, like, he wants that, like, productive criticism. He wants that. He wants to absorb that and learn from any of those aspects. And I think what is encouraging is you saw some of the things in minicamp. He really quickly fixed those in that work that he had over the summer. He spent time with Gardner Minshew. He spent time with a number of his different weapons on this Colts offense. And I think that's already paying dividends for him. He's been incredible in every sense, his professionalism, everything. our Colts production staff, we do a Behind the Colts series over the course of training camp, and Anthony was one of the guys who the team rode in with, in addition to Coach Steichen, Ryan Kelly, and Juju Brents, all rode in with them from their homes as they came in to report at Grand Park. Anthony was asked about what his goals are for training camp, and his 3 goals, it had nothing to do with, production, numbers, being named a starter, none of that. His goals were to be a better leader, to create chemistry with his teammates, and to stay healthy. And I think that is very indicative as to the mentality that Anthony Richardson brings in. And one of the things that Chris Ballard noted day 1 of camp was his overall demeanor. He's incredibly even keel. He doesn't get rattled easily, and he thinks that that will be something that will provide him a really good foundation to navigate the inevitable highs and lows that any rookie faces in the NFL, especially one that is playing a high pressure position like quarterback.
One of the big trends from the Colts drafting the last few years has been chasing these super athletes, these guys that have got insane measurables across the board. But now we get to the NFL, where basically everybody is a super athlete. How many of these guys over the last couple of years still stand out, even in this environment, as this is a world of super athletes, and he is still clearly head and shoulders more explosive, more spectacular than some of these other guys?
I think one of those that comes to mind, who has been one of the major stories of camp, is Shaquille Leonard, right? He was drafted because of these really incredible measurables that he was able to produce, and how he impressed the Colts scouts and Colts front office, of course, through that process, and that resulted in the defensive rookie of the year type of season. His last 2 years have been injury riddled, certainly, but when he got back on the field out here at camp after missing the entirety of the spring period, looked like he had not missed a beat, and that's something to credit Shaq and all of the work that he's done. He's been incredibly diligent in the offseason to get back to that point, and he is a guy who, even where people have questions on, will he be at the same level of production, because he is that takeaway factor for this Colts defense, but he's going to command a certain degree of attention from offenses when he is on the field, and there is nothing to indicate right now that he won't get back to that level that you have certainly expected him to be. I think that there are a number of guys who you will see as being, think about too on the offensive side, guys like Alec Pierce and the type of rookie season that he was able to have. Jelani Woods, that guy is just, he is massive.
I got to go stand next to him.
Try it. Like, anytime I want to feel
he's about my size, though,
right,
but,
Exactly. So, all of those guys, and you saw flashes last year of those young guys, game-winning type of plays from Jelani Woods and Alec Pierce. Unfortunately, you weren't able to see them with the consistency that you would have liked, largely because of the rotation you had certainly at quarterback and not being able to necessarily have that continuity that you would hope for some young pass catchers like that. But those are just, a few of the guys who I would note who have just been incredible on this roster across the board. And then another one who I think probably doesn't get enough credit is Grover Stewart.
Great year last year.
Oh my God, incredible year last year, and he has been one who the Colts saw something in him, coming out of college, and were able to kind of, I don't want to say take a risk on him, because he had certainly the tangible aspects there that were really intriguing, but a credit to Grover in terms of how he's able to translate them, going from, a very small program out of college and then being able to, in my opinion, grow into an all-pro type of player.
Anyone from this rookie class standing out? They had a ton of picks, another great group of athletes. I have a few of my favorites that they drafted. Sam, I know you have a few guys like Darius Rush I really liked at cornerback, Blake Freeland at tackle. Will Mallory was big. Sam, you're a big fan of him.
Will Mallory's back today. It's his first day out here. So, yeah, definitely great to see him.
Adebawore, like any of the rookies standing out early on.
Well, when you talk about, noted the athleticism that they have so highly coveted in the draft, I think Adetomiwa Adebawore out of Northwestern is one of those who just had, in the best way possible, in the most positive way possible, like freakish combine numbers, right? He's one of those who you certainly expect to be a factor on this defense. He's been very consistent through camp. I'm excited for Juju Brents and for Darius Rush. Each of them have had some limited time right now, so unfortunately haven't quite seen enough of them just yet. Very excited, though, for what those guys bring. I've been really impressed with Evan Hull and the ability that he has as a pass catching back.
Yeah.
That'll be an incredible asset for Gardner Minshew and Anthony Richardson to have him as a weapon.
And suddenly a much bigger role potentially with Jonathan Taylor, having his issue and Zach Moss getting injured.
Yeah, and Evan Hull, the thing is, he has been incredibly active since he stepped in the building. And then another guy who is intriguing to me is Josh Downs. He brings an asset to the offense that the Colts really haven't had in a while, and I think that he is responding very well and really absorbing the opportunity that he has to work alongside Isaiah McKenzie because of the veteran presence that Isaiah has, the opportunity for those two to play somewhat similar positions within this offense, but very excited. Josh Downs made an incredible catch yesterday.
That's what he does.
In practice
That's
with
great.
Gardner Minshew, and I think he is one of those who can really do some interesting things and provide some options for Shane Steichen and Jim Bob Cooter in the offense in terms of scheme.
I have to ask about Evan Hull because he is somebody that stood out to me at the Combine because at the end of every single rep, no matter what it was, he ran it to the end zone. He finished by running it all the way to the end zone. Even if they were the other end of the field, he would run 80 yards down to score at the end of every rep. He's not doing that out here. Did somebody say, look, that's great to get yourself noticed, but now pack it in. Now we've got serious work to do.
I'm not sure if anyone said anything, or it's more so just his grasping the fact of like, okay, I'm going to have to pace myself a little bit if I'm going to do this each and every day, because this is a big workload for him, and that goes back to May when he walked in the door.
And now he's got to navigate other drills that are happening. It's not as easy as it is at the Combine where there's lots of open space to run to the end zone.
Of course you asked that question, Sam. Of course you did. All right, we on the PFF NFL podcast tend to neglect running backs quite a bit, but we've also in the last month talked a ton about running backs because they're a huge story around the NFL.
Sure.
So what happens with Jonathan Taylor, and can you interpret, because what we try to do is interpret the social media stuff. Can you interpret the social media spats, the back and forths between Jim Irsay and Jonathan Taylor? Do you get into the social media?
I think it's dangerous to ever try to interpret anything on social media, like aside from the NFL. I think it's very, very, very tricky. I mean, you just hope that all of this, is resolved in due time. And all I can say is that from our perspective of working with Jonathan since he was drafted to this organization, from a production standpoint, from a media standpoint, he's incredible to deal with. He is just such a gracious person, and you guys have seen the type of numbers that he produces. So he is just such a top-notch person, obviously an incredible piece of this offense, and you just really hope that all of this gets resolved and that this team is able to move into the regular season with all of the drama behind them.
Any prediction on what happens?
None. I have learned a long time ago not to make any predictions because, especially like this time of year, there are too many factors and too many unpredictables. I mean, my first season here was 2019 when Andrew Luck retired. So
couldn't predict that one.
Right.
No.
So I no longer make predictions. I'd been in the market for a long time working for some of the local affiliates, Fox 59, CBS 4, and then started here with the Colts in July of 2019. So it has been a ride, and I think that there is a ton of optimism and excitement. Was actually just yesterday talking to a number of the guys just about how much energy that Shane Steichen has brought into the building across the board and how much this really young group is feeding off of the tone that Shane has set, because he's very clear on the expectation, the standard that not only he upholds his players to, but that he upholds himself and his staff to.
I just want to finish with this. Any predictions on the secondary? Looks like the cornerback room. The cornerback room in particular is wide open. And you mentioned the two rookies. And it's not Julius Brents anymore. He's going by Juju.
Juju. It is Juju Brents, yes.
Juju Brents, Darius Rush. Yep. Haven't seen a ton of time yet. But both guys, even though Rush was a fifth rounder, I think expectations high for both players.
Oh, huge.
Right? And
Absolutely.
do they see the field early? What are we going to see with the corners in particular?
I think these guys got to get healthy. I think the one thing for me is... are they out there when the Chicago Bears come in for the joint practices? That's going to be a really clear indication of what's going to be feasible, what's going to be realistic come regular season. I think that there is a heavy responsibility right now on the shoulders of Kenny Moore II. He's really the most veteran Colt that you have in that secondary. He learned a lot from the leadership of Stephon Gilmore last year, and I think that's going to be a great benefit to Kenny. And I think he is going to have to shoulder a lot of responsibility. And encouraged, though, by guys like Dallas Flowers, the significant amount of playing time he saw last year. That guy was a monster in special teams as well. Tony Brown is a veteran guy who you have to work with, but obviously you're putting a ton of emphasis on those rookies. Darius Rush, in the time we saw him in OTAs and minicamp, I mean, he looks kind of one of those guys where you talk about like the athleticism and all of that. Like, you look at Darius Rush and you're like, that is a scary guy to be throwing the ball in the vicinity of, right? Super athletic, super quick, long, rangy, all of those things, and seems to both Juju and Darius fit really well with Gus Bradley and what he wants to do. I think part of the reason that you saw some revamping of the secondary from a personnel standpoint is because you needed to get those type of athletes that fit the scheme that Gus Bradley has implemented within this Colts defense. They're really going to benefit by a second year under Gus in that system. Coach Milas, of course, the secondary coach in there as well. But I do think that in, 2 weeks, we're 2 weeks away from joint practices. That's where you're eyeballing those guys, Darius and Juju, to come in and see what they're able to do against a number one offense.
Yeah, I'll be keeping an eye on that secondary throughout the preseason. Got anything else, Sam?
No, I think we're good. We're going to
go
back.
We have no
more Evan Hull questions?
I know. I just needed to make sure that he wasn't, complacency getting to his head already.
I know. That's a guy who I would never say complacency ever enters his vocabulary. Yeah.